Julie Buzby, Integrative veterinarian and founder of Dr. Buzby's ToeGrips for Dogs. Today we are covering the fine art of subcutaneous fluids. Sub-Q is the abbreviation, or SQ for subcutaneous fluids, and your veterinarian may have assigned you the task of doing this at home. If that's the case, they probably prescribe supplies and may have even done a demo in the office. But I get it, it can be a little overwhelming to leave the comfort of the office and a support staff and have to go home and do this on your own. So step one is getting your dog in a comfortable position. For cats, often I do this or recommend that clients do this actually in the kitchen sink. Lay down a little blanket, a little cat bed, and then put them in the sink so it's got kind of just the feeling of a barrier, a little bit of security there. I'm actually using my body as the barrier here with Jake because I want them to feel very secure and comfortable. So that might be outside on the front porch in a dog bed where there's lots to sniff and smell and keep their brain engaged on things other than you sticking a needle in them. It might be in their dog bed in the living room. It can be on your bed. Really, place doesn't matter. It's the concept of the animal being really comfortable. So let's talk about the supplies you may have. You're gonna have needles. You're gonna have some sort of an extension line. That's the line that's gonna run from the IV bag to the needle and to transport the fluid. And then you're gonna have your IV bag. I'm gonna actually just do this right from the beginning so you can see every single step. So it comes in this outer plastic sheath to protect it, keep things sterile. And so I'm gonna start by ripping that open. It has a notch in it. Just be bold, tear that right on open. It's not food. Good boy. All right, we might need some scissors here. My first notch didn't work. Let's go with this. Oh, there we go. Second notch is a charm. All right, so we're gonna discard that outer covering, which is trash, and now I've got my fluid bag. It's still sterile. Okay, this is where we're gonna plug the extension set in, and this is covered by this white plug, so everything's still sterile, but we want to keep it as clean as possible. In general, try to think about the concept of sterile technique when you're doing this whole process. All right, so next step, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna take the extension line out of the packaging, and your veterinarian will have prescribed all this, so you don't have to think about what supplies you need because it comes in different sizes, different drip rates, but you just follow the instructions of what they gave you. All right, so here's the tubing. Now, here's our first step where sterility really matters. You wanna just be as clean as possible. I'm going to open this port and I'm gonna plug this in. Both of them have a cover. So step one, I'm gonna just pull this off. It's a nice firm tug. My heavens. There we go. And step two, I'm gonna take the plastic sheath off of the port. And again, I'm gonna not lay anything down on a counter. I'm not gonna let it touch my hand. I'm gonna keep it only touching air, and I'm gonna carefully insert it right in and just drill it all the way in to that port. Sink it as far as you can get it. All right, so now that's clean and sunk. Now, I'm gonna take the bag, and this is an important step. Right now, this tubing is all filled with air. And so we need to, what's called prime the line. We need to get all the air out of here and get fluid only coming down. And so this can be a little bit messy. I'm gonna hold this up and just let fluid run down my line until literally it starts to come out the other side. It makes a little bit of a mess. So to do this, I'm gonna unscrew the end. And I'm just gonna let this come through. See the water squirting out the end? Not water, the fluid. And then once that's coming out, I'm gonna take my whirligig, very scientific term. I'm gonna take the IV set and screw this all the way down, the white roller bar, all the way down, which then acts as a plug to stop anything more from coming out, and yet it's all primed. There may be little tiny air bubbles along the way. You can, I don't know if you can see a couple here. That is fine, little ones are fine. For going under the skin, you're not gonna kill a dog by putting air under their skin. If we were putting this into a dog's vein, we would be taking this a lot more seriously because air emboli, air can actually act as a problem in the heart when it hits the heart and actually stop the heart. So sub-Q fluid, there's a lot more grace, and you can get away with some air. So now I've got this end. Again, sterility is the key. If you've noticed, I haven't touched it to anything. I'm holding it out, and I'm not gonna let it come in contact with anything. I'm now taking my needle. The needle may be in a paper package like this, or it may be in a plastic sheath. You're gonna twist it open or tear it open. Watch me do this. I've got the tabs, and I'm ripping them apart from each other to expose the end of the needle, not touching any of it, keeping it very clean until I plug them together. So I've maintained sterile technique. I twist them onto one another, and then this little end screws down to further kind of seat that needle on. Okay, so what do I have now? I have my bag, I have my primed line, I have a clean needle ready to go. This is pink. It's an 18 gauge needle. The needles are color coded by the gauge. It's a big needle. 22 gauge is probably the smallest you'll use. That's blue, and somewhere between 18, 20, 22, that's probably the size of needle that you're gonna be using. If the needle seems big, don't be intimidated by that. Really, I think to the animal, a poke is a poke. The biggest needle I've ever used is to microchip animals. It's like a gigantic needle, comparably, because it's gotta insert the microchip through the needle barrel. And so it's really big, but honestly, the animals don't seem to react any differently to that than they do a vaccine needle, which is relatively small. So a poke is a poke. The advantage of a bigger needle for sub-Q fluids is that it goes faster. The bigger the bore, the bigger the diameter for the fluid to run through, and it speeds things up. So go with what your vet prescribes, and don't be shy or concerned if it's a big needle. All right, this is where you may need an assistant. You can either pre-rig something to hold the bag up, or you can get an assistant to hold the bag up. But gravity is our friend here. Okay, now we're gonna poke the dog. Now, you can do sub-Q fluids over the hip area on both sides, but the best place to do them is in all this floppy skin, and Jake is a hound, so he's got a lot of floppy skin, to do it in the floppy skin over the shoulders and the back of the neck. And so when you go to insert the needle, come here, baby. When you go to insert the needle, you're gonna take the skin and lift it up. Not a gigantic lift so that the skin is essentially perpendicular to the dog, just a little bit of a tent. We call it tenting the skin. And I'm going to insert the needle at roughly a 45 or maybe even a 30-degree angle under the skin. I don't want to go too deep like this because I'll end up in the muscle. I'm just trying to hit the subcutaneous space, which is that space between the skin and the tissues of the dog. And there's a lot of space here. You can imagine dogs getting in a dog fight and grabbing onto this flesh, and it's freely movable, which it's an advantage that flesh is freely movable compared to people who don't really have any. They have a subcutaneous space, but not this degree of skin. So I don't think we do sub-Q fluids in people for that reason. It's really a dog and cat thing and other animal thing that we do. So I'm gonna take off the cap. I'm gonna insert the needle, and when I lift this up, I'm gonna kind of distract him. I'm being purposely, I don't want to use the word rough, but I'm being purposely very tactile because I want to distract his brain from the impending poke. So I'm lifting this. I'm going to get a little bit of a tent right here where my finger's pointing, and I'm going to go in and insert, and I'm actually kind of squeezing fairly hard his skin. You see his facial expression. I mean, he's really not bothered right now. He just feels like he's being petted. And then I'm just going to surprise him with a little poke. And you saw that. I mean, there was no reaction. You want to be confident in that poke. Don't, tap the needle into the skin and slowly work it in. It's like ripping off the Band-Aid, just get it in there. Now I'm going to go back to my little controller. I don't know what the scientific term is for this. My controller of the flow, and I'm gonna open it up full bore. And I do that by taking it all the way up. Okay, now flow is happening. If you look at, you see the window there in the bag, do you see the drip happening? That's really good. You want to see a nice rapid drip like that. Some people will squeeze the bag as hard as they can, start from the top and like roll it down. I know that's common even in veterinary offices, and I'm not going to say it's wrong, but my personal preference is for gravity to do the work. But if it's not dripping, then there's a problem. It means that the needle is either bumping up against tissue, or possibly the needle gauge is too small. But for your typical dog, especially the dehydrated ones, this thing is flowing like it's just full bore running in, and you want to watch this. If for some reason, I'm going to show you a potential if there's a problem. Hang on one second. Okay, so let me get over to the bleb here. What's gonna happen is they're gonna get a big bleb. It's actually gonna raise up like a camel hump. And I don't like to see those get huge. As long as it's dripping on its own, it tells me that there's plenty of space in the subcutaneous fluid, and I just let it continue to drip. If it starts to get taut in there, the dripping may slow down, and if that's the case, I'll go to a new spot. And I do like to change the needle every time. I just think from a sterile technique standpoint, it's important. So we're gonna assume that I have a nice big bleb here. Once it's done and I'm ready to change, I'm going to scroll down with my thumb. That's gonna turn it off. I'm gonna pull out the needle. Again, I do it in the same rapid motion as when I put it in. Okay, he didn't even move. There may be a little bit of leakage from the dog, either fluid or even fluid mixed with blood. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. You may have just hit a little superficial skin capillary when you went in. So you can just put like a gauze or even some rolled up toilet paper, just hold pressure on there for a few minutes or even seconds, just for a little bit, and that will kind of seal up and stop. You then recap the needle, being careful not to stab yourself, and you could change the needle out to go to your next spot. Typically, if I'm gonna put 300 cc's, even up to 500 cc's in a dog, I might end up using 3 spots, 2 or 3 spots, depending on how well they're absorbing it. Again, a dog that's really dehydrated will suck this down. Their skin, their sub-Q space just kind of absorbs it, and you don't even get much of a bleb. Dogs that are not really that dehydrated, you'll see a more pronounced bleb. Okay, so the last thing I want to address is what happens if you go to run the fluids and your little window here is completely full, and so you can't see what the fluid's doing because it's all entirely full of fluid. If that happens, you just turn the whole set over and squeeze a couple times to allow air back into this window, and then when you turn it back over, you'll once again have space. Just watch, because sometimes in doing that, it can feed air back into the tube, the top of the tubing. And so if you see a lot of big pronounced air bubbles, you probably want to re-bleed the line then before you start. But once again, I reiterate that a little bit of air in the subcutaneous space is okay. You know, little small air bubbles, don't worry about them. If you have big giant sections where there's air, I would make the conscientious effort to re-bleed the line. And I think that's all there is to say. I do think, as I said to start, this can be really intimidating. I mean, you've got to channel your inner James Harriet to go home and do this. And it's the kind of thing that maybe when you're in the vet office and the veterinary technician was explaining it, it all made perfect sense and it seemed great. Now suddenly it's 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday and you're at home trying to do this yourself for the first time. So hopefully this video is helpful, but above all, I want to stress that on the scale of intensity for veterinary procedures, this is really a pretty low one in terms of the risk. You are going to do fine. Keep everything clean and sterile to the best of your ability. Be confident when you poke the dog. The dog's reading your emotions. So if you are nervous or scared or tense, they're going to perceive that. It's going to make it worse for both of you. So do your best, and I promise it's something that once you get the hang of it after a time or two, it's super intuitive, you'll be great, and it's really something you can do at home to help your dog's quality of life, help your dog feel better. Being hydrated is key to just feeling good and maximizing health and longevity depending on your dog's underlying condition that required and necessitated the sub-Q fluids. Always, I defer you back to your veterinarian. That is your source of truth for your dosing, for your frequency, any questions you may have, but I hope this tutorial was helpful in the meantime.